Hi, today's presentation would be about the social class in 1920s Beijing and how did this affect Lao She's writing on his novel. This presentation will be split into three parts. The first part would be about Lao She's biography. The second part would be about the social class and economic power in 1920s Beijing. And the third part would be how this affects Lao She's writing in his novels, especially the way he portrayed social classes in his novel. So, here we will talk about Lao She's biography. Lao She is a Chinese novelist and dramatist that is born in Beijing in the 1899. In his early life, his father died in a battle with the Eight Nation Alliance Force in 1901. After that, his mother did laundry in order to support their poor family, which has a big impact later on Lao She's writing. In 1924, Lao She became a teacher in the University of London, where he read about many English literature and began his own writing. Nowadays, he is known as one of the most significant figures of the 20th century Chinese literature, with some famous work including The Rickshaw Boy and The Tea House, etc. So back to our topic, social class in 1920s Beijing. The society of Beijing in 1920s have a very large gap between the higher class, which is the rich, and the working class, which is the poor, with the working class obtaining a large percentage of the society. The working class mainly contains people like workers, farmers, etc., that have a really low pay and hard life in the society. Some evidence of this can be seen through the events that happened during 1920s, which is the May 13th movement that happened in 1925 and the Autumn Harvest Uprising that happened in 1927. We will briefly talk about these two events. The May 13 movement started off due to an incident of factory owner or manager illegally dismissing and beating workers. This movement, in other words, is about a major labor and anti-imperialist movement that factory worker protests about to increase their pay and safety in the factory. Here, we can see that workers are upset of their low pay and unsure of the safety in the factory. On the other hand, the Autumn Harvest Uprising is an insurrection that Mao Zedong led farmers to protest against China's National Party. Here, based on the two incidents we said above, we can imagine of how hard the life is for the working class in the 1920s. The higher class, on the other hand, in the 1920s would be mostly students or governors that have a very high education and society power, which compared to the working class is only a minor percentage. From the things I said, we notice that 1920s China is really messed up as the gap between the rich and the poor is really big, where the rich are served by many servants, which where the poor are working day and night and is barely surviving. In 1920s, wealth isn't the only factor between these gaps. Family background may also be one factor. As many people said in history, born in a wealthy family and having a family background is already halfway success in the society, as rich people are mainly the ones that hold power, and mainly since they are more educated than the poor. However, this does not apply to Lao She, since even though he was born in a poor family, but he worked really hard to reach his position of a university teacher and a famous novelist. The society in 1920s Beijing really affected Lao She a lot, as it affected the way Lao She writes and describes characters in his novel. Looking at the novels that Lao She wrote, we notice that these stories are mostly focused on ordinary people's life, which is mostly talking about the rich and the poor. Take the book Rickshaw Boy, for example. We see Lao She describing the rich being very selfish and self-centered, where was described as the character of the Yang family, where they treat servants like dogs and is only thinking about themselves, like what they can gain for themselves. On the other hand, Lao She described the poor as being really humble, as they need to work really hard in order to survive, even if the employer is being really mean to them. This can also be seen in the book where how the Yang family is asking Xiangzi to do everything. In this book, Lao She shows vivid description of the poor's feeling and how the rich reacts towards them. This might be due to the experience that Lao She had been through as he is born in a poor family. Another famous novel of Lao She, Four Generations Under One Roof, also talks about the life of the rich and the poor, but in this case it will be during the Japanese occupation, which once again shows us how Lao She used his experience about social work into his writing. And that's the end for my presentation. Thank you for listening.